What do you feel is most important for new Fukara to focus on?
I suppose the dimensions of living a new life. It's about change, and they're becoming a different person in many ways, or at least intending to, changing one's focus, and accommodating the things that the Tariqa would consider facilitative to a spiritual life.
And at that point, you have it as a point of reference.
Oh, yes, right, good.
That you can remember when you look at other things. See if they seem to have the same meaning, or that a new meaning is suggested, or this thing is just incompatible with my spiritual life. But there's something nice about being in that space, because you're better able to see things as new. You feel like you're looking at the world with fresh eyes, in a sense.
Yes, and an openness to do that,
right,
I would say, is extremely important, and a curiosity that prompts that.
Yeah, and as far as focus, I mean, you might focus on the method. If you're new in the Tariqa, you might need to give it some attention, but you stepped into a new world when you enter the Tariqa, so it's nice to feel that way for a while.
Yes, that's encouraging. Sayyidah Zainab?
Well, I would have to say, and I think I've said this many times before, but practice what you have, and practice and practice and practice. And if it doesn't work for you, then seek something else that does. Because I feel that often we have so much doctrine and literature about method, but reading is one thing and it's good, but to practice it is a totally different thing. And so, I feel like many times I repeat myself, and I'm guilty of it mostly also, because there's never enough practice one can get. But essentially practicing the method again and again to see if it really works for you or not, if it really brings about any self-transformation in yourself or not.
Yeah, but you can't be too impatient for that change to come.
Right, yeah.
Or think you know what it is.
Yes, and all you can do is do what you can, practice faithfully and to the best of your ability. But then at some point you need to say to yourself, is this working? And ideally you have companions and possibly even a teacher who can help you answer that question.
Right.
Sayyidah Badriya?
I mean, I think the three of you are probably in a better place to answer this than I am. I think I can't give an answer to this question because it depends on the individual.
Well, when I first entered the Tariqa, I just, since, most of my life then and now is not practicing some formal method or something, but there's still the name, and that's what I started with. And I found it really, really worthwhile trying to invoke all the time in the midst of everything I was doing. There's a kind of awareness that goes with that. But it's nice to have that all the time. I wish I did, but I can always get it with the name.
Well, as Sayyidah Zainab says, it's necessary to try all of these things, to do them as best you can and see if they work for you.
Yeah, and that's part of self-knowledge.
Exactly.
Everything you decide to do can show you something about yourself.
And it also helps to be able to have some idea of what it is you're doing, which is in many ways the purpose of doctrine, but also the explanation of method.
Right, because there can be methodological instruction that, it's kind of like doctrine, but it's not, because it can only be enacted.
Right. And if you find that it's not working, well, maybe it's you. Maybe you're not doing it right. Maybe there's some dimension of this practice that isn't open to you or hasn't been explained to you, or maybe doesn't exist. And all those are fair questions.
Yeah.
One fairly good thing about sticking with tradition in some sense of formal orthodoxy is that most of it has been worked out over time and perfected by people using it over decades, if not centuries, which doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you, and doesn't necessarily mean that it hasn't somehow been altered or decayed or changed over time. But in general, it does give you at least what has been for some time a successful framework in which to practice.
Right.
So that's helpful.
Yeah, you don't want to second guess yourself too early.
Yes, exactly. and similarly, I don't know any of the direct path teachers who would advocate giving up one's formal tradition.
Right. There's no reason to. You might change your understanding of it so that certain aspects of it that you didn't understand that has felt like a burden might not seem that way.
Yes.
Yeah.
But what about when good traditions go bad?
Well, that's a problem, isn't it? Because over time, things tend to get brittle, and times change, and they can become ineffective, and sometimes they can become corrupt.
Right.
And I don't know any place that's immune from those forces.
No, it's just, and the problem is that what those forces are can kind of sneak up on you. That when you're not paying attention or whatever. But anything in the formal realm suffers from impermanence, so it need not be a source of anguish. One might feel sad for something that's just about something that's disappeared, but there should be something that hasn't disappeared that gives meaning to things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Any more comments here?
Okay, moving on.
Was that Zainab switching her mic on for a moment?
Yes, just to say that no, I think Sinitala made very good points.
Okay, next question. Regarding the direct path, well, it is direct and it is simple in a good way. Within that directness and simplicity, how much room is there to grow and learn new things?
Well, one wants to know the truth and grow in one's knowledge of intimacy with the truth and realization of the truth. And that's a lot of growth. And what more could you want?
Yeah, that way you can also decide you want to learn a language or something. That's not incompatible with spiritual life.
No, but let me also say that the direct path is in many ways a jnana yoga. And as all of the religions, all of the great religions of history are addressed to the whole person. That's what has made them so effective.
Right.
They have doctrine for the mind, objects of worship for the sentiments, rituals for the body, and acts of service towards the divinity and the community that addresses the whole person. Similarly, in Advaita tradition, there are 4 yogas.
Yeah.
And a complete path involves all 4 yogas. And as much as the direct path is essentially a jnana yoga, the particular individual travelers need to have these other elements of that engage the rest of their persons in the spiritual life. And that's different for different people, of course, but
and that's another way to decide whether something is working for you, but not be too hasty about making that decision.
Yes, that's right. And if you think things aren't working for you, it may be because you need one of these other yogic elements to act as a catalyst for your principal activity. Also an area in which the Tariqa has failed dramatically over time because it hasn't provided an opportunity for service. And it really hasn't provided much of an opportunity for worship because there's been so much denigration of Bhaktism.
Yeah, well, I'm not, the Tarika is a jnanic path too.
Oh, he said it was.
Yes, and it will, so it will seem to place jnana at the, at the top of the list.
Right.
Which is fine, but if you consider it that way and refer to bhakti, and it's obvious you're saying it's further down the list, this doesn't mean that you're against it.
Well, except I've certainly heard it described that way.
Yeah.
So we can't have that. That's bhakti and sentimental.
Yeah, right. The truth, but what it really is, we can't have that without jnana.
Well said. Well said. Other comments?
Well, I think from what I know about direct path, it's direct, but it also appreciates the value of all the yogas that are available to the individual to sort of, realize what's missing. So, I think we all touched upon that some of us have a higher capacity for jnana yoga, whilst others have for bhaktic yoga. But in a sense, trying to get to a balance where all these four yogas are in balance is really where the harmony is. And I agree that the Tarika has always been portrayed as something that jnana yoga has a hierarchy over all other forms of yoga. But yeah, and that is probably the downfall, of working your spirituality from that perspective.
Can I add something to that? I've been just hearing. I just came in. Sorry about that. But yeah, assalamu alaikum everyone. By the way, yeah. So, but our tariqa, it doesn't really. It's not jnanic in the same way that direct path is jnanic, right?
No.
I mean, it's actually a question. It seems like it's an overemphasis on doctrine, and I think it's jnanic yoga gone up.
It's jnana yoga that has become a caricature of itself.
Right. Yeah, I think that's
correct.
very well said.
Well, jnana that doesn't recognize the others is ignorant.
Yes, it considers the others inferior or ignorant.
Right, because you don't know. If you're not living that way, you don't know what all is available in it and where it leads people.
Well, I also can think of many cases where people seem to be stuck in their spiritual development, but they're not looking at the other yogas as a possible additional element in their lives.
Right.
They're so focused on jnana in this case, and what they really need is an element of service or bhakti that would liberate them.
Yeah, but and karma yoga also, you can get past thought, and that's good, because it's tempting in a purely jnanic path to think that you can think everything, and that the understanding comes from you rather than it's already there. Are you going to be with it? There's something inherently, well, it's easy for anything to become egotistical, self-centered in a negative way, I suppose. But all I know is that the exclusiveness of how our Tarika was represented to us did us no favors. The exclusive nature, the way it was characterized, there's us, and then there's four bhaktis, and then there's these profane people, and that doesn't work.
Right. Was there almost a comment there somewhere?
I have a question here regarding the bhakti element. Is japa yoga considered a form of like bhakti yoga, because you're kind of devotional to the name in a certain respect? Maybe I guess that's only with respect to the first four themes, right?
That makes sense.
Yeah, but if you love the name, you could call that bhakti, but the truth of the name is jnanic. So Well, I can't even say it's exclusively that, but normally getting to the root of things is a genetic activity.
That element is often included for those who will have it or can do it in terms of love for the prophet.
Yes, yeah, or for the virgin.
Yes.
I mean, love is love.
Yes. Are we answering your question?
Yes, sometimes I like to just sit back and listen where it goes. I do have to say, I liked that comment that was basically stating that the Tariqa was like spoiled milk. I mean, not now, but in some ways there have been times that it's felt like that. Like it's this wonderful, nourishing thing that had all of the vitamins and minerals and proteins that a healthy spiritual body needs. But then you go to have a drink of it and you realize that it's gone bad.
It's past its use-by date.
Yeah, and not to mention that many things can be made from spoiled milk. Cheese, for example.
That's a sage comment. Thank you.
But yeah, I mean, it's just everything needs to be renewed. I'm someone that believes that we've gone down horrible, wrong paths in the modern world. And I absolutely think that we need to stop. We need to ponder why we've gone down the wrong paths and change direction. But we always have to move forward. I believe that a lot of things were better in the past, and we need to use the past as an inspiration for moving forward into new things. But it always has to be new things. You can't ever go into the past because just, it's a bit ironic for all of his insistence against automatism and mechanism and everything in the modern world. What could be more mechanic than some of the doctrinaire points that Sheikh Issa makes that try to bring us back into the past, or Rene Guénon for that matter is much worse in some point. I love a lot of what they write. I think they're wonderful people in many respects, but I also think that it's naive to say you can turn back the clock. You need to move forward, but use the past as a guide. What's good here and now? What's good from the past? Let's take that and make something even better.
Yeah, and remember that people have been using these forms, even if they've degenerated a little bit, for a long time to find truth. But you don't need to try to go back in time in order to claim that. It's available here now. Once again, I'm reminded of Brother Dave's comment. You can't do anything again.
Good old Brother Dave.
The other thing is sometimes it's good to have a simple path, because there's boundaries there's limitations. You can't waste many hours in fruitless pursuits of things. With the Tariqa, you almost have access to so much scholarship, so much doctrine, that you could miss the forest for the trees, You get caught up on all of this philosophy, all this theology, and you spend your life in that, and you're like, what have I done? Where's the practice? What did I actually get from this? And you have to realize that knowledge, spiritually speaking, is not the same thing as worldly wisdom. And I like the comment of Lawrence where he says, to know fully, we have to leave off knowing.
Yeah.
Yes, well said.
We have to stop thinking we already know, and then we're open to things.
Oh, right.
All right, so next question is, are there absolutely false religions, or do all religions fall somewhere into a gray area?
I don't know how to answer that question.
If it's false, is it a religion, or is it just something that's characterized as one?
Well, I would also say there's only one thing absolute. So the straightforward answer would be no, because there's only one thing absolute. But religions in and of themselves don't make themselves false. What happens is our understanding of that religion or following of that religion is what makes it false, if anything.
Right. So what's false is the understanding, or the
What-
belief in your understanding.
Well, what I'm getting at here is there's no religion that's completely true. There can't be. And your answer, Saida Zainab, would be a perfect answer for that. You know, there's only one thing that's absolute. No religion is absolutely perfect or true because it's in the realm of contingency. But with this question, I'm thinking of, what about cults? You know, that doesn't necessarily come down to just understanding. What if there's some cult? What about David Koresh?
Yeah, okay.
Is that an absolutely false religion? And I'm asking this question because Sheikh Al-Bashir, you've mentioned a number of times that you can attain enlightenment from meditating on a can of Coca-Cola. And I'm wondering, someone is sincere and personally has the right attitude if they can even, you know, find truth in a horrible cult.
Or find their way out of it.
Yes, the path of truth.
Well, you know, every good lie has a truth in it somewhere. So in that sense, I don't think anything could be totally false. But
Well, and in this sense, can someone find the truth anywhere? Well, God willing.
in principle.
In principle, yes. And you mentioned obvious examples like David Koresh, or more like Heaven's Gate, perhaps, which looks pretty crazy from this point of view. I can't speak to the destiny of the people who followed that cult.
Right. I find myself thinking of Mormonism, which I do think is a false religion, but a lot of people benefit from it. And if they're looking only for the things that it can provide, then, you know, they can be satisfied and they can be good citizens even, you know. But it's obvious to me, well, maybe it shouldn't be so obvious, but it seems obvious to me that you can't go very far in that religion unless you get hit over the head with a big ball of grace that, you know, opens the heavens for you or something.
Well, since this is turning into a podcast, maybe we should stay away from particular examples.
Well, I mean, I think it's fine to use examples like, you know, Heaven's Gate or whatnot, because I think there are very few people that would disagree that they're a cult. Personally, I'd have to disagree with you, Sidi Talha, about Mormonism. I personally don't find much of any truth in it. I have no interest in it, but I feel like probably there have been some people in history that have found their way to God through that path. It's not a religion that I've studied enough to know enough about it, but you know.
Well, Theta, I've on several occasions spent time among the Mormons, including in Provost a couple of years ago, and I was struck by the fact that, as far as I could tell, all of them I met were trying as hard as they could to be the best possible people they could be.
Right.
And they were evidently trying to do that. And that was impressive.
Yeah, it can't be entirely false, I suppose, if it teaches virtues and things. But there are a lot of people that are very content with it, and it seems to give them, you know, a kind of peace in life, and that's not a bad thing.
Now, looking at their doctrine, you know, is a little confusing.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. Try there's a Mormon text called The Doctrine and Covenants, or just Doctrine and Covenants. And I remember reading around in that, and that's when I realized that the founder may have been delusional. I mean, there's all this stuff about, you know, God the Father lives on a planet that's opposite the planet Kolob, or something like that. And even if there were a way to make that make sense, I don't think it helps you spiritually at all. And Mormonism never breaks free of form. It never breaks. It's sort of a karma yoga. You know, I don't think they have any objects of devotion. They sort of revere and you know, and respect the founders, but I don't know. I just really don't think they've got a bhakti either. I think it's a way of living. It's more karmic.
I mean, to really make it clear, I mean, you have to ask yourself, first off, what's a religion? And second, if you have some clear criteria of what a religion is, are there some out there that absolutely cannot lead one towards enlightenment? And I think at first, when I was writing this question, I thought, no, there are no false religions. But then I started thinking about what is a religion. And when you think about it in a certain way, you have to realize that certain modern movements politically have all the characteristics of traditional religions. In some very real sense, what is Nazism? What was it? What is it? But a religion, a false satanic religion, a cult, really,
Not really.
with profit. And it's one of the few religions out there, if you can call it one, that I'd say can lead only towards evil.
Well, if it doesn't lead up, you start to go down. You know, I married a Mormon a long time ago, and that's why I looked into it. The thing that struck me is nothing that I found in their primary text, which they claim includes the Bible, but in reality, nobody knows much about it. There seemed to be nothing in there that came from revelation. It's like the Book of Mormon is just a historical story, basically. It's like the Old Testament without any particular insights in it, and the doctrine just looked crazy. So I don't know if I call it a religion, but it's a way of life that some people benefit from. But I don't think they have high expectations, or rather, I don't think. Well, I don't know. Maybe they haven't acquired a truth or a taste for the truth quite enough. But they get answers. People like answers.
Yes, people like answers. We've discussed that before.
Right. But there is no unity to be found in Mormon doctrine. It's like a pyramid scheme where, you know, people move up a notch on the chart if they live good lives and they have a temple marriage and you know, wear the right underwear and things like that. And I don't know. It just seems like there's nothing really transcendent in it. The only thing it does is give you a sense of, you know, what your position in the universe is. And, you know, it has a kind of salvation, but, you know, if you make it to the next level, you know, you get to create your own earth, which is going to require you to find a female counterpart for that, because you have to copulate to populate. It's got some strange stuff in it. But the people I've met have all been very nice, friendly, calm. They're not all that way, but the ones I've met. So is it a religion? Does it tie you back to anything? I don't think so. But it provides a comfort in this life for a number of people. And that probably keeps them from going out and starting wars to a great extent.
That would be worthwhile.
Right. And, you know, one good thing about Mormonism is it really is about being a spiritual person. It really is about, you know, there is self-improvement, if not self-perfection implied there. And I just don't think it's It's only evil to the extent that it diverts somebody into a dead end that otherwise might have found the real thing, but who can say what somebody would have found? But it's limited, very limited. And I think basically it started out as a cult. It's sort of like a cult that has become a religion rather than a religion that turns into a cult.
City Talk, sorry to interject, but I think I'm really happy you mentioned that, because in many respects, this could be a criteria of whether or not a religion is true, is does it have a history, enlightened sages, mystics, and saints after the founder?
Right.
That's a very good definition. I like that.
It's important.
And, you have that in, Catholicism, Orthodoxy, Protestantism, even to a certain certain forms. You have it in Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam. You have it in the ancient Greek tradition, but you do not have it in any of these cults, because they're incapable of producing a saint.
It's kind of like they can't take you any higher than the founder. And if the founder was imbalanced or a charlatan, that doesn't bode well.
Yes, I think that's a good definition of what a religion is. There may be individual teachers throughout history that have been worthwhile for those around them, and for all I know, for that may be who have offered techniques, approaches that are useful today, but that's in many ways different than a religion.
Well, the direct path is not a religion.
No.
And is better for it.
It doesn't have all the baggage.
I mean, it's like a toolbox. It's like something that helps. It's great. It's an add-on feature, to a religion, and that's wonderful. It would lose, for me, every benefit it has if it tried to become a religion itself.
Yeah, I like the kind of absoluteness that comes with the direct path. Denying anything is absolute. It's just a way of looking at and experiencing your life. That includes a way to experience your religion, if you've got one, because there's no conflicting doctrine. It's all just experience.
And most doctrines are disconnected from life.
Yeah.
They're disconnected from life, from the world, from here and now. And they're so complicated without reason. No doctrine, I don't care if you wrote 1 million volumes, could come even close to describing the absoluteness and infinitude of the divine. The closest you can come are intimations through symbols that you can get from poetry and stuff. And in terms of philosophy, I think some of the earliest sages got closer to it than anyone else, because they put it in the form of poetry. They directly connected it to actual lived life here and now. And it was short and it was simple and it was direct and it was to the point. And you can read through everything Heraclitus wrote in like 15 minutes and be like, wow, that's not much. But you come back to it again and again and again, and you realize there's more wisdom here if you sit down and ponder upon it, and connect it to your actual life and practice than in all of these abstruse works of Hegel and so on and so forth.
Yeah, a philosophy that isn't practical, isn't lived on the practical level, is really just a mind game. When I've read some of the Stoics, and it's obvious that this isn't about thinking, and they had something there, and they still have things we can learn from them. But I don't know if we can find any teachers. There's some people that like to represent themselves as modern Stoic teachers. I don't know about them. I wouldn't trust it.
But one thing I thought was great was probably the premier modern Christian theologian of our times said that he only writes theology to support his family, but couldn't care about theology itself. It's boring and doesn't have any connection to life or God as God actually is in being. And he actually prefers novels. He said he prefers to write novels, and the only things that he has written that he says he wishes would last would be the novels and poetry. And he feels like you can get more you can get closer to God through Dostoevsky than you can through any of the major theologians in history. And as time goes on, I have to agree.
I'm not sure I'd be that absolute about it, but I know what you're talking. I know what you mean, I think.